Welcome to the Financial Freedom Secrets Show. This is your host, Jackson Milan, the Wealth Mentor, helping business owners create financial freedom faster by mastering the language of money. Want to see how well you're tracking towards financial freedom? Complete our 40-point financial performance scorecard at wealthhealthcheck.com.au. That's wealthhealthcheck.com.au. The average score for most business owners is 18 out of 40. So complete the scorecard now and see how well you're tracking towards financial freedom. All right, g'day guys, this is Jackson Milan, the Wealth Mentor, and we're here for another episode of Financial Freedom Secrets Show. I've got a great guest here today who I actually met in the flesh a couple of weeks ago when I trekked halfway around the world to try and get to beautiful Busselton. It's about 3 hours south of Perth. I was lucky enough to be presenting at a mastermind that Chris was present at, and we had a great opportunity to catch up then. So for those who don't know, Chris Benetti runs Smart Author Media, specializing in helping information business owners who have a book use their book as a way of essentially growing and scaling their business. So I wanted to deep dive into his business model, his journey as an agency owner, as a wealth creator himself, and hopefully share some valuable insights with you guys today. So Chris, thanks for joining us. How you doing, mate?
Yeah, I'm doing good. Thanks for having me.
Mate, good to have you here. So for those who don't know you, tell us a little bit about your origin story, mate, and let's get to know you a little bit.
Ooh, yeah, my origin story is quite an interesting one. And it kind of goes back to like coming out of high school and like most of us not really knowing where we want to go, and just kind of jumping on the first opportunity that came up for us. So I was typically a workaholic in high school. I was like that one kid that worked like pretty much every night, every day. And yeah, I had actually saved up a decent amount of money, $20,000 by the time I left high school. And then I kind of just like stumbled into becoming a mechanical fitter in the iron ore mining industry because I lived in a mining town. And my first year as an apprentice, I ended up saving $50,000 total. So after that, I basically decided to move to Perth and buy a home at 18, and then just kept chugging along, kept working in the industry, and ended up getting a second house at 21 by using equity, which may or may not be the right strategy, but it worked for me at the time. And then ended up just loathing the industry. Like I just kept seeing other guys who were like 60, 70 saying it's not bad working in the mines and all this crap. And I'm just like, man, everyone here is miserable. And I knew that there was a better way to achieve the wealth success that I wanted for myself and my family. And entrepreneurship kind of ended up being the reoccurring theme that kept popping up for me. So I ended up getting fired from mining in the end of 2016 due to some unfortunate circumstances, and started working with Kim Barrett, who has a local digital marketing agency here in Perth. I worked for free for a couple months and then found a knack for sales funnels and things like that, and ended up working with him for about a year and a half. And then we partnered on my own agency, which has had a couple of kind of reimaginings, I would say, in the last 6 years or so that I've been in business.
Fantastic, mate. So let's get back a little bit to the mining space. And the interesting thing that I see is that in the FIFO mining space, what attracts people there is typically the big bucks, right? They earn big money, and they typically go there not necessarily to make a career, but to earn money and get out. Being on the kind of front lines and observing it, mate, and being one of the few who actually was able to escape with more money and be able to build wealth, was that typical, or how did most of your colleagues manage their finances through
Mm.
your observations, mate?
A lot lived a overextended lifestyle from my perspective. They lived up to the money that they were earning. And so there were certainly outliers who were smart with what they were doing. But a lot of people didn't really have a plan. I saw so many people who were leveraged out of their eyeballs, and not with assets, with liabilities like cars and boats and just crap like that. And they were, we were earning like 8 to 12 grand a month after tax, like kind of everyone within the mining space. And yeah, a lot of the guys had like literally repayments of close to that, and so they would go home and have their 1 week off and then come back to the site for 2 weeks. and just be miserable. They were just like there to earn the money so that they could support the lifestyle that they didn't really have because they're away for 2/3 of the year.
Wow, yeah, it's so crazy, and I've observed the same thing. My old man worked in oil and gas, but he was FIFO, and I observed exactly the same thing. So obviously, you made the leap and got into entrepreneurship. Now, why digital marketing, mate? What originally led you to kind of go down that digital marketing and that funnel route?
Mm. Well, to be honest, I found people like Anik Singhal and well, at first it was Tim Ferriss for me, and the 4 Hour Work Week kind of opened my mind to digital commerce, I should say, and just the leverage that was possible there. I didn't really understand it the first time I read it, but it was exciting. And then through other people like Anik Singhal, like Russell Brunson, who are some of the bigger names in the internet marketing space, which I'm grateful to say I'm kind of friends with both of those people now today. But through those guys and like what they were teaching about affiliate marketing, about email marketing, about sales funnels, and all these kind of things, like it just was exciting to me. And I'm, like most people listening, when things excite you, it's just like it's something that is it's almost like a passion that can kind of cross paths between being able to earn a living from and being able to create wealth from as well. And so like I get very bullish on things that excite me that I also enjoy that can also make me money. And I think as business owners, especially when we're fresh, anything new that's exciting is something that we just like to dive head first towards. And that's certainly what I did. Like I just went all in on it.
I love it. Yeah, look, it was definitely the appeal for me. Obviously, I took a traditional business and turned it into an online business, and I think there's very few businesses that are afforded the level of flexibility and freedom that we have as online business owners. We can basically run our business from anywhere in the world, and it's very very flexible, very very nimble, which is basically one of the biggest appeals.
Mhm.
But was it all it was cracked up to be, particularly in your first iteration, Chris? Like, what happened in the first foray into building your digital agency, mate?
Mm. Well, I had two paths. The first, I was lucky enough to kind of be an entrepreneur with Kim and his Your Social Voice agency. So that gave me a bit of flexibility in regards to making mistakes and things like that. It wasn't really like a big risk to my personal life when I did stuff up. And so that was a really good, I guess, on the job education for me.
Mm.
Um, when we officially started the agency, it was also a bit of a challenge. There was several weeks where I couldn't pay myself a salary or a wage, and that was obviously quite stressful. Um, but it kind of the thing I love about business is like every challenge is an opportunity to do something different and learn from it and be better. So I actually went down a path where I was struggling to get clients in the first like 6 months of the agency. Um, and I just started like trying to do work for free for like bigger names because like my thought was that I had a lack of like social proof credibility and more so results that I could prove that like what I know is actually beneficial for people. And you're honestly like for me, like one person away from getting like endless referrals and endless business because of the outstanding work you do with that one person. And for me, it was someone named Rachel Peterson, which is also, she's a pretty big name on social media today. And so I did something for her and it ended up being very beneficial for her from a monetary perspective. It outperformed everything else she was doing at the time. And she signed a 12-month retainer with me essentially, and then
Wow.
went on to refer probably $500,000 worth of clients over time to me as well. So, um, yeah, that was like the thing for me. It just kind of stacked, and by the end of the 12 months in business, we had done about $330,000 in revenue or so.
That's phenomenal, mate. And look, all from
Yeah.
that one thing. Now, going back, how much time do you think you would have invested into that relationship up front for free?
Oh, it was probably about a week and a half worth of work, to be
Okay.
honest. So not.
So let's say what were you on in the minds about it was what it was about 12 grand a month net, right? So let's just say it cost you what, 3, 4 grand in terms of net time equivalent to when you're working in the mines to
Yeah.
make 330,000 over 12 months. I think that's a pretty phenomenal return on investment.
Yeah, it
That's
definitely
fantastic.
was it was a good ROI for sure.
That's great, mate. That's fantastic. And I think it's just the power of that law of reciprocation. Like I know that in business, when I've just gone out and tried to do nice things for people, like not necessarily with any intent of getting anything in return, but the world always has a way to pay it back, right? And
Mhm.
I see there's so many people that are so closely guarded and fiercely protective of their time. They don't go above and beyond for people, so they don't get that value. So I think that's a really important lesson, mate. And it just goes to show if you want it enough and you're prepared to lead with value, then that value comes back tenfold, which is
Yeah,
awesome. So,
highly
mate,
agree.
let's talk about the traditional agency model. So, at the time in that first iteration, like, what was the scope? What were you doing for people?
Mm. Well, I like to say now that I was pretty much a commoditized agency.
Mm,
And what I mean by that is like I was selling a service. It wasn't necessarily an outcome. I wasn't differentiated from others. I just had the benefit of being well known and well known in a pretty competitive space, but also working with like the top dogs in that one space. It was essentially the ClickFunnels internet marketing community.
yes,
So, I had a lot of benefits and was able to pretty much drive business based off of referrals or social organic referrals as well. Um, so the agency simply was just funnel building, like
mm,
essentially someone would come to me, they're like, "Oh, Chris, I need to do a webinar funnel." And I would go, "Cool, I can do that for you." And I would not do the copy, but I would do the design and the development and the integrations and all of that kind of stuff. And obviously, that funnel is a vehicle to them being able to earn money, but I didn't really have a part in the marketing of said funnel or the actual, like I could increase the performance, like the conversion rate, optimize the funnels and things, but I wasn't really driving anything behind that. So, I wasn't much different from the other 100 people in the space, essentially.
sure. And looking back, mate, is there anything you would have done differently in that kind of funnel building agency based on what you know now?
I would have productized it much more. So I probably would have like today. I just do book funnels. As a funnel building service, and that's very very straightforward to replicate for each client. So set up for a client. Back in the day, sometimes it would take me 2 months to build a funnel. Today, it's like 2 weeks or less, um, and it's much easier. So I would have productized the way that we took on clients. I would have probably specialized to a specific funnel vertical. So like only doing this type of funnel. Um, but beyond that, like I feel like everything else was pretty well dialed in. The only other thing, maybe I would have got a copywriter who I worked with a bit closer so that I could just charge that a little bit more on a
Makes sense.
premium.
Yeah,
Yeah.
great. Look, it's interesting. Even our journey in our business, very similar. We had a financial services business that was offering kind of holistic advice across the board. And of course, it's so hard to replicate because everyone's needs different and what they come to you for is different. And then we
Mhm.
productized our service where we said, okay, if you're this particular type of client, this is the pathway to get you where you need to go. And not only is
Mhm.
it far easier to deliver on, but it's far easier for a consumer to understand what they're getting. Because I think
Mhm.
when we're dealing in that service space, it is so esoteric and hard to understand, and they only see the value after the fact once they've got to the end, right? And they can't buy that up front. They've got to take a leap of faith. So I can see
Mhm.
exactly what you've done, which is awesome. So let's then transition into the smart author media, mate. So what was the kind of straw that broke the camel's back to lead you to want to productize, to niche down, and to specifically focus on book funnels, mate?
Well, it was off the back of two more financial years after that first one, and they were, I would just say, quite dismal. It was like pretty much half the revenue for both of the financial years.
Mm,
And I think it was because I literally got burnt out. The first year was essentially project, 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 and no real recurring revenue. And I'll come back to that. And so the second and third year was again same thing, but like I just didn't really have the capacity to commit to what I did in the first year of business and go all out. Um, So for me, I first identified that like, hey, I'm not really enjoying business. I'm not enjoying what is going on. And I actually found a mentor um, who had the business lifestyle and financial outcomes that I kind of wanted for myself. Not exactly, but very well aligned, had the same values and the same way of doing things. And I reached out and asked if he could essentially mentor me, and he did. And with his guidance, it was essentially, let's take what my expertise was, which was sales funnels and conversion rate optimization, and let's do a new skill, which was advertising, and something that he was extremely good at. And let's create a new business model that was niched, so serving a specific type of person, and also recurring, so that I wasn't having to start from scratch. And that's really like the two things that I never nailed down in my old agency model. And I never really found the right mentor to guide me through that process, who kind of had done every step that, and even now for like the next 5 years, he's kind of already done those steps. So I'm kind of sorted generally. So yeah, it was kind of a culmination of all of that.
That's great, mate. And it's just interesting to see that we've a great, highly niched, profitable premium service is always a combination of commodities, right? And it's just how those things are blended together in order to create this really specific outcome for people that drives so many of the results, not only for them, but also for you in terms of
Yep.
the recurring revenue and being known for something specifically. So, mate, let's then dive into the specifics of the book funnel. So let's say there's an expert that's listening to this, they've got a book, and like most people, it's sitting on Amazon or it's underutilized, right? Why is a book funnel so powerful in order to grow your business? And how do we better utilize it as an asset or a tool for growth?
Mm. Well, I would say first and foremost, if you have a book, you already stand out of the crowd. If I'm shopping financial advisors and Jackson has seven, like is it seven or like it's close to seven now,
I
surely?
got 4 books now, but
Four.
there's
Okay,
two in
four.
draft as
I
they're
was
coming
kind of
out. So
close.
we're getting there.
Jackson has 4 books versus someone who has like no books. Who's more likely to be qualified to give me financial advice? Like probably Jackson, right? The fact that Jackson also is like pretty vocal about working with business owners and helping them be able to focus on business growth, whilst still being able to set themselves up financially and not lose money in the process, is really a good identifier. So like there's niche and then authority there. So for me, like if you have a book, you already are someone who stands out in the crowd of other providers or coaches or experts. And if you're not really utilizing it to its full extent, that's a missed opportunity for me. So the benefits for a book funnel versus just listing on Amazon is that you can sell books on Amazon all day, and sure, you'll get full price and people will trust buying on Amazon. But ultimately, you leave the ball in the book buyers or book readers' court to then follow up with you. The thing I love most about book funnels is that as soon as someone buys a book, or even as soon as someone starts to buy a book, we can capture their details and we can nurture, follow up with them, and ultimately get them to do what we want them to do through the process. We can get them to book in a strategy call with us, or watch a webinar, or consume any content, or read an email or SMS or whatever. Obviously, doing it with good intentions and things like that. But ultimately, the ball is in our court to follow up, to nurture, and to convert that person to wanting to work with us. The other benefits is that we can drive really good ads to the book funnel, and with the revenue that we generate in the book funnel, we can actually offset the advertising costs. So if you are someone who has a book and you also might have paid workshops or additional courses, or even an audiobook version of your book, you can sell those as additional little assets that someone can buy when they're going through the process. and you can actually increase your average order value to offset the ad spend. So if I'm spending $30 to get someone to buy the book in the first place, and then they're spending on average $30 in the funnel, you can now see that that costs you $0 to get someone to buy something from you. And that is a much more qualified lead in your business than someone who just opted in for a PDF download or something like that. So those two things married up help to just create, obviously, a influx of people who potentially are at a net zero cost to your business to actually acquire, but then also someone who's more qualified to work with you. And the fact that they've opted in or bought a book from you, again, just helps to increase that quality, in my opinion, versus them just buying, a course or something that is a little bit more commoditized, because everyone can do that, but not everyone can write a book.
Yeah, it's interesting. There's this stigma around book writing, that people get placed on a pedestal. Even now, like I say, I've published 4 books, and then go, oh wow, like that's crazy. Like how did you do that? And it blows people's mind. And I don't think it's that big of a deal. But I guess from somebody's perspective who's never done it, it's pretty impressive, and it just creates that social proof, and that level of trust. There's something about it, particularly a physical book, that we've even found through our marketing efforts, that if we can get a physical book or 4 into the hands of a prospect who doesn't really know me, who's maybe seen a couple of videos on social media, it just accelerates that relationship so much faster, and it just reduces their let's call it the bullshit meter, because let's face it, when we're in the online space, there's a lot of charlatans out there.
Yep.
So I feel people are quite defensive, and being able to prove that we actually know what we're talking about is a big part of the battle of converting them as clients, right?
Mhm. Yeah. And I think it's like, it's a physical reminder in someone's office that you know what you're talking about. And even if they haven't read it, it's a physical reminder to read it and get the proposed outcome that the book is promising. And surely if they go through it, if they align with what your values are and what you've spoken about, then there's a little call to action page at the end of the book where they can reach out and start to want to work with you. So I think another good side benefit is, like, through the book funnel, we can get a lead today, but then that lead might book on our calendar today, but then they also might take 3 to 6 to 12 months to read your book and go through, and then they'll come back. So it's almost like a life cycle of leads coming through all the time, because
Yes.
there's people today, there's people tomorrow, and there's people in 12 months, kind of thing.
It's really interesting, mate. My highest level program is my VIP mentoring that I charge 10 grand a month. And I had a client come on board who bought my book 5 years ago. And he goes, Jackson, I read your book and I really liked you and I really like what you had to say, but it just wasn't the right time. And I've just been following you for the last 5 years, and now I'm ready to come on board. And I'm just like, wow, like
Mm,
I think that's a bit of a record, at least for us. But it just
yeah.
goes to show, right? When you create that goodwill and you can create that impression, that stays with people. And I don't think there's
Mm,
many other assets quite like a book that does that, which is why this is so powerful. Now, ads can be scary for people, mate. Obviously, there's the funnel component, and I'm sure we could talk for days about the whole process of creating the funnel and stacking the offers and whatnot. But let's talk particularly about the traffic. When it comes to running profitable or high value traffic for a book funnel, what are your top tips, or also potentially the biggest mistakes that people make? What can you share with us?
mm. Well, I think it's not overcomplicating it. For me, I simplify everything as much as possible, and even to a point where we had a new client start like 2 weeks ago, and they're like, "Oh, why aren't you testing this, this, and this?" Like, and she obviously had run her own ads in the past before, and it was in relation to like audience testing.
Hmm.
And what it ended up coming down to is, okay, cool, I'll test those things for the client's sake, so that she's happy that we're testing a lot of things. But at the end of the day, at the end of the week, and the results that we got, the bulk of our results were from the broad audience that we initially had launched and were running ads to. So I was just like, okay, cool. Like, simplicity often is the thing that scales for ads.
Yes.
And if you can just be as simple as possible, simple and effective, then I think that you can get the outcomes that you want when you do want to start running ads. And for me, I do broader audience targeting. I don't go into like really granular details, because to be honest, like, there's a lot of audience crossover anyway in running ads. And I would rather put my energy and effort into copywriting, offer testing, and creative testing. And to be honest, the biggest needle mover for us is creative testing. So when we run campaigns, we write copy that is aligned with the sales page so that there's congruency. When someone clicks from the ad, the thing that they read on the ad is the same thing that they're reading when they click over to buy the book. So I think just keeping it simple there. And then the targeting again is broad. It's kind of specific to somewhat what we are wanting to target. So Jackson, I would target like other people who are wealth mentors in the space. Like Robert Kiyosaki is quietly wide known. Warren Buffett's a good target as well. So things like that, I would target those, and they typically have big followings. So it allows for us to get a lot of broad audience and continue to run the ads on those audience for a long time before fatiguing or anything like that. And then lastly, coming down to the creative elements, this is the biggest needle mover. This is the thing that we test. Like we test between 1 and 10, if not 15 different creatives every single week per client. So we have created a machine to basically update the creatives that we test on a weekly basis.
Right.
And this is a mixture of like the graphical images that you run, the photos of people holding the book that you run, the videos, maybe it's someone flipping through a book, or the author is talking about the book and the benefits and outcomes that you can expect to achieve when you do read the book. So those kind of things are actually the biggest needle movers for us when we're running the ads, and it all kind of aligns at the end of the day. But simplicity first is our approach for sure.
Makes sense. Yeah, and it's interesting, right? The algorithms are so powerful these days that I think sometimes we try and overthink it, and we've got to let the machine do what it does best. And
Mhm.
at the end of the day, it's the creative that the people are interacting with, and that's what resonates with them or not. So it makes so much sense to focus all of your attention and energy there.
Yep.
So that's pretty powerful. And I think the other part to that is that if you're focusing too much on the attribution or the targeting, you're potentially excluding audiences that could be interested, or including audiences that aren't interested, right? So once again, I think it makes so much sense, and keeping it simple is the way to go.
Yep.
So, mate, let's talk a little about your ideal client. So maybe somebody's listened or watched this, they've got a book, they're interested in getting some help to turn that into a book funnel that's going to help them acquire more of their ideal clients. What do they typically look like? How would you describe them? Let's start there.
Yeah, so it is essentially people who have a book that is specifically a lead gen asset and aligned with their business offer. So whatever their back end offer is, maybe it is financial services or coaching. If the book on the front end aligns with that, and it's a good lead up towards whatever that service is or offer is, then that client is typically a good fit to work with us. All of our campaigns, we do sell books, like that's our service promise. But the outcome that we want is people who buy the book to work with you in your business and pay you a lot more money. And so if you have an offer that is within the $5,000 or above range, and it might be one time, it might be recurring or whatever, then typically that is a good fit for us to market a book on the front of. And we've even got guys who are like solo consultants. They literally pay us thousands of dollars per month, and their book is essentially a lead asset for their consultancy business. They can only take on like 7 clients total, but it's worth the investment for them because a client comes through and they pay them $5,000 a month minimum. So if they fill those 7 spots, and the example that I'll give here, like he's filled 5 out of 7 pretty much at this stage,
There
and
you
it's
go.
been 3 months. Like it's not a bad ROI for him over time. And so we're just consistently filling a pipeline. So even if you're a solo provider and you've got that kind of service on the back end of your book, it's a good fit. But certainly if you're someone who has more of like a coaching offer, or more like an expert or a mastermind offer, and it's a bit higher ticket and it's a little bit more scalable, that's who I like prefer to work with, because we can really start doing big numbers on the front end to drive and feed what is on the back end for you.
Beautiful. That sounds great, mate. And so if somebody's listened or watched this and they want to get in touch, what's the best way for them to reach you?
Smartauthormedia.com. and there's a green button on that website to book in a marketing chat with me. And ultimately, we can go through what you're doing with book marketing now, and put a roadmap in place. And if you're not doing any book marketing yet, then we can obviously put a plan in place as well. And if you want our help to implement that stuff, then we can do that. Otherwise, you'll have a really good action plan to implement it yourself.
Awesome, mate. That's fantastic. And if you had to leave the listeners with one last golden nugget to round out today, mate, what would that last piece of advice be?
I would just say, for me, it's the consistency and the action that you take today. Like that's what's going to create the outcomes in the future that you want tomorrow. So even if things aren't really working today and it feels like you're banging your head against the wall, like you're kind of one consistent action away from getting everything that you want tomorrow. So just like keep consistent, keep working towards the outcomes and the goals, and it will happen eventually.
That's great advice, mate. It's been an absolute pleasure chatting today, mate. You've shared so much value. Guys, just remember a good idea in theory remains exactly that, just a good idea until you put it into practice. So make sure that you implement at least one thing that you learned on this show. Chris, thanks again, mate, and look forward to catching up again soon.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Jackson.